Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gradidam Purani Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashayatyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharatataila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetre Kapanaye Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvo Panishado Gavo Dogda Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sudam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Thank you for joining after a long time. That's my fault. I was out of the country for 4 months. But after Amma's grace, we are in our 9th year of Bhagavad Gita Yajna. But we just had a 4-month hiatus, with our last class being January 12th. Nevertheless, I'm sure that everyone remained focused on the Gita and their studies, regularly watching the replays of earlier classes, right? Okay. In that last class, we completed up to verse 53 of chapter 8, the final chapter of the Gita. That means we have covered over 96% of the Gita. But due to the long hiatus, instead of just jumping back and finishing the remaining 25 verses, we really should brush up on the overall flow of the Gita. This will help in understanding the development of ideas from where we left off. So that's going to be our goal tonight. And next week, from there on, we can resume where we left off in chapter 18. So, more importantly, let us remember why we are studying the Bhagavad Gita in the first place. Most importantly, let us remember why we are studying the Bhagavad Gita in the first place. It is not to inflate our ego so we can tell people, oh, I studied the Bhagavad Gita for years. It's also not to belabor the technical details, tickling our intellect and making ourselves feel intelligent. Because Amma says that spirituality is beyond words. It's an experience. And to savor its sweetness, we must go beyond the intellect to the heart. In that regard, I'd like to share a beautiful story that Amma once told, which shows what really matters to her the most. A poor farmer was standing outside his hut one day when a crowd passed by. He asked where they were heading, and they said, "We're all going to a 3-day discourse of the Bhagavad Gita." Wanting to hear the discourse, the farmer joined the crowd too. When he got there, the place was mostly wealthy people wearing expensive clothes and jewelry. The farmer, however, was dirty from his work, wearing tattered old clothes, and he was not allowed to enter. Extremely dejected, the farmer prayed, "Lord, I came to hear your story, but these people won't let me in. Am I so worthless that I don't even deserve to hear your story? If this is your will, so be it. I will sit outside and listen." He sat under a tree and listened to the discourse from a distance. But he couldn't understand anything because it was all in Sanskrit. Again, the poor man was heartbroken. He called out, "Oh Lord, I can't even understand your language. Am I such a terrible sinner?" At that moment, his eyes fell on a large picture displayed in front of the hall. The picture showed Lord Krishna holding the reins in one hand as he expounded the Gita teachings to Arjuna, who was sitting behind him in the chariot. Gazing at the Lord's face, the farmer's eyes filled with tears. He completely lost track of time. When he finally looked up, the discourse had ended and the participants were leaving. The second and third day also, he returned to the venue, but he couldn't stop thinking about the Lord's face. His only aim was to sit under the tree and gaze at the picture. Tears overflowed from his eyes. He experienced the Lord's form shining brightly within himself. He closed his eyes and completely forgot himself. After the crowd dispersed on the final day, the scholar who gave all the lectures came out of the hall. He saw the farmer sitting motionless under a tree with tears streaming down his cheeks. The scholar was astonished. He thought, "What is this man's weeping why is this man weeping even after the discourse is over? Did my talk move him so profoundly?" He approached the farmer, who was sitting very still. From the expression on his face, it was clear that he was brimming with bliss. There was a sense of perfect peace around him. The scholar got the farmer's attention and asked, "Did you enjoy my discourse that much?" The farmer replied, "Sir, I don't even know Sanskrit, so I didn't understand a word you said the past 3 days. But when I think of the Lord's condition, I feel overwhelmed with grief. Didn't the Lord say all of those things while looking backwards? His shoulder must have hurt so much as he kept his head turned back like that. That's why I'm crying like this." It is said that the farmer attained enlightenment as he uttered those words. It was the farmer's compassion and innocence that made him eligible for self-realization. As the scholar listened to the farmer's words, his own eyes filled with tears, and he experienced a peace he had never known until that moment. The man who gave the discourse was a highly intelligent person. The people in the audience were also well educated. But it was the poor, innocent farmer who was able to savor the sweetness of devotion and become qualified for realization. He was an example of selfless compassion. His anguish was not about himself, but about the perceived hardship of the Lord. Now, I hope this story has clarified what Amma values most, which can be the guiding principle as we resume our study of the Gita. Scriptural study should make us more selfless and compassionate without sacrificing our innocence. Some of you will remember that the Gita is broadly divided into how many sections? 1, 2, 3, 4, 10? 3 sections. Chapters 1 to 6 are the first section. That's 280 verses, which is about 40% of the entire Bhagavad Gita. The next 6 chapters, 7 to 12, are 209 verses, which is about 30%, followed by the final section, 13 to 18, and that's 211 verses, which is also about 30% of the Gita. So let us review the predominant topics discussed in each of these 3 sections. Each of the 3 sections covers 3 topics: the main teaching or the philosophical focus, the application of that focus, and a key factor to keep in mind while doing so. The 3 topics in the first 6 chapters are Jiva Swarupam, which means the essence of the individual. And there's Karma Yoga and the importance of self-effort. In this first section of the Gita, God, or we can say Ishvara, is not discussed much. It's kind of a surprise. The second chapter was mostly about the impermanence of the body and the eternal nature of the Atman. The third chapter talked about Karma Yoga, the name of the chapter. And the 4th through 6th chapters were mostly focusing on Jiva Swarupam. It means our own essence, not the body, our true essence. Throughout section 1 of the Gita, Jiva Swarupam is dealt with from 2 angles. The individual soul, or the jiva, as separate from the individual body, which means it's attributeless, and in Sanskrit we call it nirupadika. And that is the ultimate truth that Amma experiences. And the second way of looking at the jiva is as associated with the body, mind, and intellect, which is our experience. So it means it's with attributes, sopadika. Since Amma sees beyond the level of the body, she sees only Satchidananda Rupa, Satchidananda Swarupa, which is pure existence, consciousness, bliss, eternal, and all-pervasive. For us, the very same jiva becomes an individual as we know it, because we link it to the body, mind, and intellect. That is how we become the doer, so to say. Actually, with the Atman, we don't do anything, but because we identify with it, it means we become the doer. And once we become the doer, that means we accumulate karma. And once we have karma, we're going to suffer by identifying with all the roles in our life, whether a spouse, parent, employee, whoever you are. Thus, the important point is that the jiva, or the soul, itself is not the source of our problems. The source is that we confuse the jiva, our individuality, to be the same as all of our preconceived notions about our individuality. So you think maybe, oh, I'm beautiful, or I'm unattractive. I'm healthy. No, I'm unhealthy. Oh, I'm really smart. No, I'm unintelligent. Oh, I'm an important person or an unimportant person. All of these are descriptions of Maya, not of our soul. Remove all those descriptions from the jiva, and you will end up with pure consciousness. This is what is meant by Jiva Swarupam, one of the predominant topics of the first 6 chapters. So I would like to suggest something as a homework assignment. I'm not going to check for you, but it's for your own good. Go through the Gita text chapters 2 through 6 and try to identify verses that refer to the jiva in a non-dual way with no attributes, and verses that refer to the jiva as we see it now. This exercise will help us refresh our memory and also remind us of our own true nature. I know until here we have only been talking about the main teaching of the first section of the Bhagavad Gita. What about the application of these teachings? What about the second topic? sadhana, basically. Though various types of yoga are introduced in the first section, the predominant emphasis is on karma yoga and acquiring chitta shuddhi, which is inner purification. Chitta shuddhi is something Amma always talks about. You will hear it on the stage many times during the daily programs. And the disciples are always using that word as well. So we better learn it. It means inner purification. Then there is a third topic for each of the 3 sections of the Gita. A key factor to keep in mind while trying to apply the teachings. In the first section, it is individual effort. Krishna says that we have to purify ourselves through karma yoga, which obviously requires a lot of effort. In chapter 6, he says one must lift oneself out of samsara because each person is their own best ally and worst enemy. So that takes care of section 1. Very short summary. But what about this thing called God? We didn't talk about it much in the previous section. Why have humans worshipped God for thousands, time immemorial, you can say? Amma also talks about God all the time. So what is God, and why do we worship God? Such questions naturally enter our mind after our initial exposure to Vedanta and the Bhagavad Gita teachings. Because if you say it's Vedanta, then everything is God. So I'm God also. That's a dangerous approach. So we'll get to that soon. Thus, the predominant topic of the second 6 chapters, 7 to 12, is Ishvara Swarupam, the essence of God. God is described as Sarvagnya, Sarveshwara, Sarvasrishta, and Sarva Karma Bhaladata. That means all-knowing, which is omniscient, all-powerful, which means omnipotent, and the creator of all, and the bestower of all karma. So if we think that we're God, we have to be omniscient, omnipotent, and are you the one that's giving the karma out to everybody? I don't think it's me, so we shouldn't confuse ourselves like that. Our essence, we'll see, is the same, but where we are now, we cannot say that. By the time we reached the 10th chapter, everything was described as God's glory. In the 11th chapter, Lord Krishna revealed his cosmic form to Arjuna, showing that he is none other than the all-pervading God. Like we learned about Jiva Swarupa from 2 different angles in the first section, in this second section, we learn about Ishvara Swarupam from the same 2 angles. Sopadika Ishvara and Nirupadika Ishvara. That means God without attributes and God with attributes. So, just like the jiva can be viewed with or without attributes, so can God. We can view Amma, or God, or let's say we can view God as Amma, as a 5-foot tall woman from Kerala. She looks like this. This is the language she speaks, and so on. Or we can view the very same Amma completely free from any name, form, or qualities. The latter reveals that God is none other than the same pure consciousness that we heard about in the first 6 chapters. We realize that they're the same. Once, during a TV interview, the interviewer asked Amma, "Who are you?" Amma replied, "People call this body Mata Amritanandamai, or Amma, but the real Amma is all-pervasive, existing everywhere." In the second section of the Gita, we learn that the true nature of God, as Amma experienced it, is the changeless, formless, all-pervading consciousness. That is why Amma can also say, "My children are my God." Because when she refers to us, she's talking about the Jivatma, which she knows is free from all attributes, Nirguna Chaitanya, the formless consciousness. Then what is God? Who is Amma? They're the same thing. That's how we can say that. It's not a cult of personality. It means she is in the state that we want to be in. We're not there yet. So we need her to guide us to that. But the same truth is realized when someone reaches self-realization. Though we can't perceive the unity in our present state, Amma can. We project a lot of attributes on the Jivatma, and Amma is here, happily, and hopefully, and luckily. She's here to help us remove all of those attributes so we can understand the essential unity of us and God. What is the sadhana recommended in this section of the Gita? It is called Upasana, which is meditation on or worship of Saguna Ishvara, God with attributes. We allow attributes to be there, but we have in the back of our mind, we have this idea that God is everywhere. That's pretty much what we do a lot. In particular, Krishna emphasizes the importance of seeing the entire creation as God. Another teaching that is the same as Amma. Amma has said, if you cannot love that little ant crawling on the floor, you cannot say that you love me. So for her, everything is her body. She says, Mother Nature, she sings that song, Mother Nature, you're, God in another form. She's talking about herself. But if we don't have the love for nature and that means we cannot pollute nature, we cannot abuse it. That's the only way to show our love. But Amma says that unless we have that love, we don't understand what God is. In Amma's world, we simply call it Bhakti Yoga. We understand that it's not just singing bhajans and doing pujas and so on. Then why call it Upasana? Because it implies the importance of acquiring Chitta Ekagrita, a one-pointed mind. We have so many troubles in keeping our mind focused. So when you say Upasana, there's an element of focus and concentration in it. So when you say Bhakti, yes, but when you're singing, you might not understand that. So that's the reason why it's there, and I think we should understand the meaning of that as well. So don't just call it Bhakti Yoga. You can use both words. And that's also why we have white flower meditation, because we can't focus much. And that's also why it keeps changing every once in a while, because if it's the same thing always, we'll be asleep in the middle. And that's also, we need a gong every few minutes. So these are the reasons, because we need a lot of focus. Now, what is the key factor to keep in mind while practicing our Upasana? In this second section of the Gita, the emphasis is on God's grace, because you're supposed to surrender and you wait for God's grace, but you try your hardest. So, but ultimately in bhakti or Upasana, we have to the last thing is the Guru's grace. So once we've done our job, we've done our best, we wait for grace. So that's why in the second section, it is surrender, or the importance of God's grace. Now, some people get confused because they don't know which one is more important, individual effort or God's grace. And I hope everybody knows what Amma says, because she says it all the time. Both Krishna and Amma mention both. And Amma says very clearly, our actions condition God's grace. So how hard we try and how kindly we are to people, how much we actually live Amma's teachings, that much grace will come to us. So that means we cannot rely on one or the other, effort or grace. Because if we depend on only one, we run the risk of becoming either egoistic or fatalistic. And Amma doesn't like either one. as you can imagine. Now, before we review the third and last section of the Gita, I would like to share an Amma story from the late 70s that will help us understand Krishna's teachings. It was the day before Tiruvonam. Tiruvonam is one of the most important celebrations in Kerala, and most people just call it Onam because it's like a short word for it. Amma, excuse me. Amma invited all her children. That means from Big Swami down to whoever it is. There were probably only 10 or 15 people at that time, and they were still in studying and all that, so they weren't completely, surrendered or renunciates by that time. They had to go back to their homes every day. So she asked them to come for Onam lunch. They promised to come because they wanted to, but the following day their families wouldn't let them leave without eating at home. They were like 20 or 21 or 2 or something. So, in India, especially in those days, they were still considered to be kids. So imagine it's a Christmas dinner or something, and you say, I'm going to go to somebody else's house. And they would be so upset. So they all got delayed, and buses were very crowded too because it's a big holiday. So some of them only reached at 3:30 p.m. They lived about an hour away or more because those days the transport was slower. So one Swami related his account of what happened after they all arrived. I think it was the first person who arrived that day. Having crossed the river on the ferry, I quickly walked towards the ashram. I can never forget the heartbreaking sight that met my eyes when I reached. Amma was lying on the bare ground, covered with sand all over. A makeshift oven was nearby her. Crows were pecking and eating cooked roots from the pot, and some pieces were lying scattered in the sand. Later, when Amma awoke, she related what had happened. Amma had asked her children to come, but she wondered what to feed them. I don't like to burden the family members like Suganachan, Dayamanti Amma, Damayanti Nama. So I made a little clay oven in the yard. Going to the garden, I plucked some roots and kept them in a pot in the oven to cook. When it was fully cooked, I kept the pot closed without removing it from the oven. Extinguishing the fire, I waited for the children to come. Amma went to the boat dock many times, looking to see whether her children were coming. She didn't eat anything either. When it became late, she laid down in the sand, thinking, it was wrong to call the children. Being Tiruvonam, will their families let them leave their house? At that moment, a crow flew by, pecking one piece of cooked root. Amma got up hurriedly. Some pieces had been scattered on the ground from the pot. Some more crows came and tried to eat. What will I give my children? Amma felt sad and was about to drive away the crows, but the next moment I thought, they are also my children. Let them eat. Then Amma went into a blissful mood and was just lying on the bare sand after that. So this story should remind us of chapter 9, verse 29, where Lord Krishna says, I am equally present in all beings. To me, there is no one hateful or dear. So if you think you're Am's dear, darling son or daughter, that means everybody is. Don't think you are the only one. The story also shows us how easily Amma can shift back and forth between our standpoint and the state of a jnani, a God-realized being. One moment, she looks at the crows as a nuisance, like we would. The next moment, the crows are her children. And when Amma calls us her children, it has a much deeper meaning that we would normally think. During bhajans once, Amma said that while singing, she sees all her children as God, pure consciousness. She perceives her children sitting before her as embodiments of divine effulgence, like millions of suns blazing. Seeing the individual soul, the Jivatma, as the same as the universal soul, Paramatma, as Amma does, is the main topic in the third and final section of the Gita. Krishna presents the unity of Jiva and Ishvara from the attribute-less standpoint, because that is the only way possible. God with attributes is, by definition, all-powerful, whereas the individual with attributes is by definition the opposite. The moment we assume attributes, God and I are hopelessly separated. He is the creator, and I am the created. He knows everything, and I know nothing. The moment we assume our respective attributes, we are diametrically opposite. In fact, the definition of God is basically all the qualities we lack. But when we drop all attributes on both sides, we become one. These three topics sum up the entirety of Vedanta: the individual, God, and their unity. This is also the implication of a famous Mahavakya, a great dictum that comes in the Upanishads: Tat Tvam Asi. Tat Tvam Asi. The word Tvam means you, referring to the essence of the individual. The word Tat means that, referring to the essence of God. And the word Asi means are, referring to the unity of the two. Therefore, the essence of the Gita is you are that. That brings us to section 3, which we started in late 2020. Let us take a look at the topics, the themes for the final 6 chapters of the Gita. The main teaching is on Jiva Ishvara Aikyam, the unity of individual and God. The application of that teaching is through Jnana Yoga, and the importance of cultivating divine virtues in that process. These are the 3 topics. In this section of the Gita, we find more teachings that sound like Upanishads. There are many teachings about worship of the imperishable, what is permanent, and Parabhakti, supreme devotion. When trying to understand Jiva Ishvara Aikyam, the unity of the individual and God, we should consider the same 2 viewpoints on the matter that we did before, with attributes and without. From the Sobhadika, with attributes, they are definitely not the same. We are finite and have a very, very, very limited ability to perceive, know, and act. God with attributes is the entire universe. But what if we removed all those attributes? Stripped of all qualities, both the individual and God are simply pure consciousness. In other words, unity is only from the Nirupadika standpoint. It's only from the standpoint of without having attributes. We can never become one when we have any. We can never become one with God if we have attributes. It means identify those attributes. If you talk with Amma, she talks about the body as being something different from her, because it truly is. In our case, we say that, but when we get sick or when we have pain, that philosophy evaporates. In Vedantic terminology, we can say that reflecting on the essence of the individual is Tvam Pada Vichara, right? Tat Tvam Asi. So when we're thinking about the essence of the individual, it's Tvam. Reflecting on the essence of God is Tat Pada Vichara. It means contemplation on the word you, meditating on the word tat, which is you, and then tvam is you and tat is God. And when we reflect on the union of the two, we call it asi padat vichara, contemplation on the word asi, which just means are. Thus, tat tvam asi is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. With Jnana Yoga as the sadhana in the final section of the Gita, it is about living a lifestyle of contemplation on the sublime teachings of the Jnana Kanda, which is the non-dual Upanishads and similar scriptures. The third topic is the key factor, and that is it's emphasized along with the sadhana of Jnana Yoga, and that is divine virtues, like humility, self-control, detachment, etc. Why should we have a focus on virtues? We have other things, all these kind of karmas, where suddenly the yogas, karma yoga, and then we have bhakti yoga. So why do we have to have this as the sadhana, that the thing that's emphasized to go along with Jnana Yoga? Well, without virtuous mental qualities, Jnana Yoga can be easily exploited to rationalize a life of decadence. People say they're a yogi, or they're a jnani, or they're a Vedanti, but they go out and do a lot of things that do not fit for a high-souled person. In chapters 13 and 16, Lord Krishna gave extensive lists of qualities to be developed as well as avoided. The very title of the 16th chapter is The Yoga of Divine and Demonic Qualities. What? Well, that's what it is, and we're going to find out the details in a couple minutes. So to summarize, the first section emphasizes Jiva Swarupam, Karma Yoga, and self-effort. The second section emphasizes Ishvara Swarupam, Upasana, which is meditation on God with form, and grace. And the third section emphasizes the unity of the individual and God, Jnana Yoga, and virtues. Now, we're going to take a look at the next 5 chapters. So we'll start with chapter 13. Arjuna asks for clarification on a few words. This is how some of the chapters start. And the first clarification he wanted was, what is the difference between kshatra and kshatrajna? Well, some of us would say, I don't know either one of those, right? Forget about it, the difference. Okay, the kshatra means the field of action, which is actually this whole universe. And the kshatrajna, jna just means know or knower. So kshatrajna, the knower of the universe. And unless someone here is the knower of the universe, I'm guessing it's Brahman or God. We want to realize that, but we haven't got there yet. The next term is jnanam, which usually means knowledge. However, in this chapter, probably deliberately, Krishna wanted him to understand that he's not ready for the supreme knowledge. So he, in this point only, really, he calls knowledge, but meaning disciplines and virtues that are followed in order to attain knowledge. So if you want to become an intelligent person in preschool or grade school, you have to be diligent. Your parents are going to tell you you have to have a discipline. You can't just run around doing what you want. And in college, by that time, it's even more disciplines. So like that, in our evolution as a spiritual person, we need the same disciplines and virtues. Without values, the pursuit of spiritual wisdom becomes a mere academic quest. This section gives us 20 important disciplines and virtues, which we strive to cultivate while still deepening our spiritual understanding through our Guru's teachings. This, in the general sense, is called Vedanta Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasanam. You might have heard those. I'm sure they're talking about it in the silent retreats and all these other places. But here, this is in the context of the Gita. The real meaning is there's no difference. And in his list, Krishna includes virtues related to karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and Vedanta vichara. So he has everything. And these chapters that have these lists of pure attributes and virtues, I compiled that into one piece of paper of 75 virtues and good qualities. So later on, when we're back in chapter 18, I can put that. Hopefully we can make it available to people on the chat window. Param Brahma is the next term that Arjuna asks about, which is defined as it is known in Vedanta scriptures, which is beyond all words and experiences. So don't ask Amma because he's going to say it's beyond. And the last two terms were the Purusha and Prakriti, which are similar to Kshatrajna and Kshatram. You can go back to chapter 7, I think, where there's a long description of Purusha and Prakriti. I could be wrong. Also, it could be 8. Yeah. Actually, it's the Para Prakriti and Aprakad. I forgot the second one. Sorry. Para Prakriti and the other one. But it's the same kind of rationale, because the Maya is Prakriti, and there's nothing else left but consciousness. Okay, chapter 14. Like chapter 13, the topic here is Atma Anatma Viveka, which is discerning between the self and Maya, or we can just say Anatma. But in chapter 14, it is more about comparing between that which has form versus the formless. That is called Saguna Nirguna Viveka. The purpose is that after differentiating, we will know what is to be embraced and what is to be rejected. We need to understand the reason why we should identify with the Kshatrajna, not the Kshetra. And that logic is given in chapter 14. The reasoning will go like this. The Kshetra, the field in which the play of Maya takes place, consists of the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And all of our miseries exist only because of these gunas, which are the cause for samsara. The ideal is that in order to become free from the bondage of samsara, we should not identify with the kshetra, which means our body, our mind, intellect. All these things are actually part of kshetra. The kshetrajna, however, is formless and thus imperishable. It is untouched by Maya. So Krishna points out all the defects of the kshetra, all the ways it binds us. And then he discusses the kshetrajna and its liberating nature. The concept of the gunas, which are the basic building blocks of creation, is thoroughly explained. What they are, what are their signs, how they bind us, what is their effect, and how to be liberated from them. The result of this analysis is that we must try to go beyond the gunas. The sadhana prescribed is jnanam, which is self-knowledge, and the reward of which is realization of our oneness with God. So you see how Amma pushes herself so hard, and the people anybody who goes close to Amma, they have to do the same thing. She's inviting us to go beyond the gunas. It's a gunatitaha, one who has gone beyond the gunas. We can't do that right now, but we can practice it. Get up early, go to bed, less sleep, fast sometimes. Just imitate Amma, and then you'll find out everything is for us to go beyond our limitations. Now, chapter 15. This chapter could perhaps be considered to be the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita where deep Vedantic teachings are discussed. Later chapters concentrate more on values, preparations, and sadhanas, which we also appreciate a lot. But this is just to let you know that this chapter is the last of deep Vedanta. And this chapter begins with a description of samsara, where Krishna compares it to a huge Bodhi tree. That's also, you can call it a people tree, or arayal if you're from Malayalam, if you're from Kerala. Samsara is depicted in detail with its branches downward from its source, which is the Paramatman. This metaphor is to help Arjuna and us to develop vairagya, or dispassion towards mundane life. When you hear something is really bad, all the negative characteristics of it, you lose your interest in it. That's even exactly what Shankaracharya says in one of his treatises. He defines, he describes vairagya, or relinquishment. Viveka, sorry. His definition of viveka is understanding that everything in this world is worthless. It's like crow's poop. I didn't get the right word, but something like that. Okay, little digression. The Ashwatha tree is so vast that it serves as an apt metaphor for the vastness of samsara, which is immeasurable. The root of this tree of samsara, which is Brahman, is invisible. Actually, this description is borrowed from the Upanishads, and similar references can be found elsewhere in the Mahabharata, as well as in the Puranas. So now, chapter 16. From here on, the Gita is not deep Vedantic philosophy. The remaining content is going to be about the conditions and preparations needed to put the Vedantic teachings into practice. The beautiful thing is that once we have those requisite qualities in our thoughts, words, and actions, we don't have to struggle to understand the Guru's teachings, because the mind is now perfectly receptive. It is conducive to the assimilation of Vedanta. And that is why Krishna gives 2 full chapters to such preparations, chapter 16 and 17. So in chapter 16, Krishna speaks of the preparations in terms of Daivi Sampat, that means the divine wealth. And the opposite is Asuri Sampat. You would just say the abundance of demonic traits, or simply bad qualities. It is our inner qualities that make us divine or demonic. And here, demonic refers to qualities that are basically bad, like ugly qualities, unrighteous, wicked, malefic, and so on. I'll give you a short instance. A person who's actually a devotee, shall not be named, and but she and another person had a kind of friction between them, and but they would come to the same satsang, and then they would, each person takes a chance to wave the flame for arati. It was just one person per week. So, but what happened is that when one of them was the person to offer in the arati, they would leave the room so that the person, they don't want to take the ash from that person's arati, the fire. And so this one person that I'm thinking of, they had just had a little interaction. And after arati, or when arati started, that woman, no, actually she left right when it ended because she didn't want to, receive the flame from that person. But that person went running after her with the spoon just to humiliate her holding that spoon. It's like, so even spiritual people, so-called spiritual people, do kind of ugly things. And that person, isn't aware of it, so don't worry. She knows. That's what I'm getting at. You don't have to be, a thief or a burglar or something like that to fit into demonic. In this 16th chapter, Krishna explains Daivi Sampat and Asuri Sampat, as well as their outcome. And obviously, divine wealth leads to moksha, but it is a foregone conclusion that we have a living Sadguru, and we are learning from her and contemplating on her teachings. So while divine qualities facilitate moksha, demonic tendencies or qualities preclude the attainment of moksha. So long as we have negative vasanas within us, it is impossible to attain moksha. Now, chapter 17. In chapter 17, it is mostly the same teaching as chapter 16, just in different language. Values are emphasized as sattvic gunas, and Krishna guides Arjuna to avoid rajasic and tamasic tendencies. In this way, using different names like Jnanam, Daivi Sampat, Sattvic Guna, all these things, Krishna emphasizes values throughout this final section. The goal is still inner preparation, which is called sadhana chatushtaya sampattihi. That is, one who has the wealth of good qualities. In chapter 17, Krishna says, if a person's life is not governed by spirituality, their nature from past births will determine what they do, how they do it, and to whom they dedicate it. That inner nature, or swabhava, means their character, their mind, their vasanas from previous births, and we all are kind of controlled by those characteristics from time to time. Krishna also divided those past life vasanas into 3 different categories. Again, sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. He then explained that their faith will be in accordance with those vasanas, which means that their faith also will be predominantly sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. From this, he further explains that pretty much everything in the world is determined by our faith. What we eat, how we worship, how we do austerities and gift giving, what brings us happiness, and so on. He has all these examples. But it's clearly a three-step explanation. A person's inborn nature comes first. And then that nature decides what we believe in. And then our beliefs impel us to do things in certain ways. Obviously, if we don't believe in something, we're not going to do it. Right? Even if we say, I don't want to do it, I can't believe it, and then Amma tells you to do it, you'll do it. But that's not because you're believing in this, it's because you're believing in Amma. So our beliefs are the ultimate deciding factor. And all of these teachings are simply to encourage Arjuna and us to seek only sattva. So now, after saying all these things, I'm going to request you to also brush up on chapter 18. We are going to have a very short concentration of that next week. And we will also resume from where we left off last week. So for now, today is going to be kind of a shorter class, and we will be in full pace and full good ready for the next verses of the 18th chapter. And there were no questions today, so we are also even a little bit shorter than that normal. So we will end with the usual closing prayers, and after that we will have a short meditation. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Those of you who have time, please remain with us for a short meditation. Close your eyes. Slow down your breathing. And try to really relax your body and mind. Take a few deep breaths. And as you exhale, feel the body in the body in. As you exhale, feel the body and mind relaxing further and further. Try to feel Amma's subtle presence all around you and within you. Feel the warmth of her embrace. Feel the peace in her embrace. Now fix your awareness on the flow of your breathing process. As if you are sitting on the banks of a peacefully flowing creek. Just observe the flow of your breath. Be a witness and watch it happening on its own naturally. Remain focused on your breath and don't miss even one inhalation or exhalation. As we focus on the breathing process like this, the mind becomes more subtle and it becomes easier to visualize. So let us visualize Amma, or it can be your beloved deity, or it can be something formless. But visualize in your mind's eye, see that form, and just immerse yourself in that rupa, that form of your beloved deity. As you mentally visualize Amma, just think of all the divine virtues she embodies. The ones that you like the most. The aspect of Amma that brought you here. The Amma that changed your life. These are the virtues that we must inculcate into ourselves. We have to cultivate them ourselves. Amma's always there to help. But first comes self-effort. Now let us pray to Amma to help us in that process of developing those divine virtues. Oh, my beloved Amma, without you, I would be lost in this world. You have already changed my life so much. But sometimes, when I fail to have the courage or the inner strength, I don't live up to my standards for myself. So Amma, at that time, please help me remember you, your form, anything about you. When I remember you, Amma, I won't make those mistakes. It is only when I forget you. So as I study these divine qualities in the rest of the Gita, please help me remember those teachings so that I can implement those qualities at the needed moment. Then I will feel like I'm truly your child. Now let us conclude with one final prayer. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnad Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purmaeva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can slowly open up your eyes if you wish. Thank you again one more time for joining us. And we will have another Gita class next week. And I hope to see you there. Om Namah Shivaya.